don't know. I don't know what color I'm feeling for this one. Like, I've got red, because during the events of Zeta's adventures, Locust take it over. But at the same time, you got blue, because we're talking about COG territory, and also the COG retake it. You know what? I'm feeling like purple's the answer. I think we need to go with purple. I don't do purple enough. Welcome to another Gear Talk. Welcome. It's another Thursday. We do this every other Thursday at 5 p.m. That's right. We're talking about Gears of War. And today we are actually going to be talking about Ilima. So for anyone who doesn't know, the name of the town that everything takes place in is Ilima. This takes place in Ephyra. This is where the main COG forces are found. This is where Jacinto is found, Montevideo. This is where like all the territories we cover involving like at home where Jacinto's being attacked. This is where it all takes place. And this, fun fact, is actually a very interesting town because this city is battled over so many times in the story. It's also the hometown to Alicia Valera, which we've already covered, and many other characters too. We're only going to cover a few of them today, but we're going to talk about Ilima and kind of just like everything that's happened there, just like from the story and what currently is going on. Ilima basically doesn't exist anymore except as like a zombie city, which we'll talk about because there's still power running to the old portions of Ilima, but there is another city or another settlement that's built on top of it. So we're going to talk about Ilima in more of just like an overall conversation, not really a history at all. We can go into the history of it, which there's not a lot to talk about. When we are introduced to Ilima, we get mostly the beginning of it is in the comics when we have Jace and his family and what happens there. Jace is also a native of Ilima. He is from Ilima originally, and we basically just get like how he survived, and it was in Ilima, but we mostly focus on the characters and what he dealt with. We don't focus on Ilima itself. There's never really a time we look into like Ilima as like the inner workings and what's going on. Like we get like some other towns that are like this, like Aldair. Aldair is another one we talked about when we did the Gabe's Convoy discussion series. It's basically for us as the players just a town we're dealing with or a city. But there is a good amount of history and a lot of combat that happens in this town. Like, this town has seen a lot. I keep saying town and city interchangeable, but shoot me. This is, like, a major battle area for territory that happens a lot with the COG and the Locusts. I think overall, if I'm to think of how many times it's changed hands, we have 1, 2, 3... I believe it's changed hands 3 times for who's controlled Ilima. So we have it where like the COG, or it's their city, they have it. E-Day happens, they hold on to the city. It is hit hard on E-Day. It is hit very hard. Jace loses his family during E-Day. They are all gone, and it's just him and Wizen who finds him and brings him into the orphanage. So when all that happens, E-Days occurred, the Locusts are fighting. They're able to fight off the Locust in Ilima, and they are actually able to get him out. Ilima is still under human control. As time goes on, years and years and years, Ilima is one of the only standing cities that are left that is still populated by humans, and the city, honestly, is one of the only ones that can actually hold a population. We learn later on it's one of their last refugee areas for humans where humans can evacuate and they can live there. This is an area that is still thriving for like living and thriving for like food and all of that. That's Ilima. It's one of the last standing. Later on, when you jump to the events involving Zeta Squad, though, this is when the turn happens where the Locusts decide to take over. When everything is going on and the battling is happening during the Kryllstorm that they're putting into place, the evacuations are happening. Everyone understands Ilima is lost. There's no getting around that fact. The Kryllstorm is the Kryllstorm. They need to evacuate and leave. You can have Ilima. We don't really have options. We can't fight a Kryllstorm. You're taking it. Sorry, it's yours. So once the battling is over, everyone evacuates and the Kryllstorm begins. It effectively has now become Locust territory. Now the Locusts don't operate in the same ideas of like we're taking over and we're going to be the ones that are in charge and like we have like a ranking system and this is our city and we're living here. It doesn't work like that. It's mostly just territory. Locusts go through and eradicate humans and scavenge what they can. They're using this as like resource areas. That's how they use it. Now, after the battle involving Rom and Delta Squad happens in 14 AE, things do change, however. It is stated here within that time period between the first game and the second game, it does so happen that Ilima is retaken by COG control. And I'm assuming how it worked is that after the bombs went off and Rom's gone and the forces are kind of wiped out in the inner hollow, I'm going to take a strong guess and say yeah, humanity was able to fight them back, and they retook Ilima at that point. So we now have citizens and stranded that are currently living in Ilima. They're not fully, the entire town is not populated. Like, there's pockets that have them. And this is all fine and good until we jump into Gears of War 2. It's important to state that while Gears of War 2 has the situation where Ilima sinks, we need to talk about why it was being aimed at to be sunk or what was going on with it. So there are 3 major cities that surround Jacinto, like a triangle kind of, you can say. The 3 cities that surrounded it were Tolan, Montevideo, and also we have Ilima. These were the 3 main ones that kind of like surrounded it, and they punched holes in each of them, sunk those cities so that they could weaken Jacinto and sink it. That was the original plan. They went through and already took care of Tolan. We get in the books, they took care of Montevideo. They knocked that one down and it was gone. We learned later it's the Riftworm that did all of this. And then Ilima was the final one that they were able to punch out. Once all 3 of them are gone, we were going to have Jacinto fall, and that was going to be the end of the main stronghold of the humans. We did end up thwarting that plan in the games, and that did not occur. We did that to ourselves and we got everyone out, but that was the original plan. And Ilima, after it is sunk, there is still a battle that happens there for control, because once it is in the sinkhole, the humans and citizens that are still alive are trying to evacuate or fight. While that's happening, the Locusts are just piling in, because now we're underground, and Delta goes in and they are also fighting. This is the battle for Ilima. This is a conversation I'm not going to really cover here. I do want someday in the future to cover like all the battles that have happened in Gears of War. There's a lot of battles, like situations where there was a big firefight that occurred for control, or a situation where like, okay, this is like a very heavy like a situation where like there's major losses and major wins. The Battle of Ilima was one of these, where the Cog forces won, but at a heavy cost. There were many lives lost. There was many situations that involved like losing the main city that they needed. Things like that. So we're not going to cover the Battle of Ilima. We'll cover it in another day in another video, but just know a major battle happens here where the Cog does walk away the winners, but not without the Locust taking heavy casualties from the Cog. Though the Cog did win, Ilima was still at that moment seen as like a hot spot for either Locust or human. There really wasn't. It was basically deserted at this point. Scavengers were the only ones that could go through and look at it. Later on, after the events of Gears of War 3, after Adam's machine goes off, the emulsion countermeasure, we do see that people are starting to move back into cities that are either destroyed or still around and starting to rebuild humanity. One of these things that are being done in these areas are settlements. Now, settlements are these areas where they're basically major mass fabricated cities, and they're like in circular chunks. I'll probably have a picture right here so you can see what a settlement looks like. And basically the idea is we're rebuilding humanity, giving them places to live, and slowly getting the numbers back up. One of these settlements, settlement number 5, was built on top of Ilima. With the towns that were destroyed, damaged beyond repair, or anything like that, towns, cities, areas, residencies, the Cog basically, the new Cog, decided that we are going to build above this, and we are just going to scrap resources from what's under. We see this with like Jacinto. New Jacinto is built over the old ruins of Jacinto. Ilima, Settlement 5 is on top of. They do this a lot because of the fact that there is not much of humanity left. We can't just rebuild what's already been destroyed. There's too much damage across the whole world. We just have to salvage what we can, and we have to just build from there. Really like the premise of 3, because they were salvaging a lot of stuff in there, so it kind of like ties its way really well into 4, where it's like, all right, we still have to keep the same mindset because there's just not enough of us to just rebuild the planet. So the Settlement 5 that's placed on top of it, now there's a very interesting thing that happens, and it involves the town of Tolan, involving Tolan Dam. When it comes to Tolan Dam was known for just busting power out everywhere. The power there, the hydraulic power, was massive. Like, the dam there did so much energy output, it was just crazy to think of. Some of the towns, and I even have them here, there were multiple towns and cities that this one dam powered. Like, I understand, like, the Hoover Dam. I believe the Hoover Dam powers Las Vegas. I don't know the full ins and outs. I'm not from Nevada, but I believe the majority of power from Las Vegas is done from the dam. And I think some of the dam also powers other areas. It's not just like a one-town thing. But to give a perspective of how much power was being put out, the entire power grid for Tolan, Spire, Fort Reval, Montevideo, and Braun was basically all done by this one dam. And it was so massive that when it was seen that like there might be a Locust attack that was coming towards Tolan, or when Tolan was sunk, many people were being evacuated out over to Ilima. And we see later on in 4, Ilima was also one of these cities that was being powered. Once the dam is repowered back up, we do see the remnants, the zombified areas, the overgrowth that's coming from Ilima. Not Settlement 5, but Ilima. It's still alive. The lights are still coming on. The power still exists. The heart is beating inside of a dead body. If you've ever seen the Owl House, I know I'm pulling a show out of nowhere, but the Owl House, this massive island is known as a Titan. The Titan's a dead body. But basically, you can get this heart kicking, the heart's going, and it's like just this living being inside of like a skeletal remain of nothing. It's basically just like that. So Ilima, basically, that's how it runs and operates for Ilima. Like, we never get a lot about the town itself. I didn't even plan on going through a full history breakdown. I kind of just skimmed a lot of the history and kind of just went a little bit out of order because I'm just talking about Ilima. This is where the entire story takes place, and Ilima is part of some of the more major cities that are inside of COG territory. We don't really talk about them that much. When I do the Planet SERA discussions, I'm normally talking about the countries or continents themselves. I'm never really talking about the in-depth cities, and it's kind of fun because especially in Ephyra, there's a lot of cities that have a lot of story. This is one of them. Like when we talked about the South Islands originally, way back in the day, we covered the whole entirety of the South Islands. We didn't just cover like one little area there. No, we covered everything really. So I thought it was nice to just do like a more, here's like a breakdown of like, here's one town. Like if I cover Ephyra itself, that's going to be a long video. There's a lot we get broken down, a lot of areas. But one more thing I'll leave you on talking about Ilima is kind of like the people who live in Ilima. So I'm not going to cover a lot because there's a lot of names here. Some of them are major characters. Some of them are minor. We're just going to cover some of the more well-known ones that we have discussed or that we know of. So one of those characters being Jace Stratton and his family. Jace is, like we talked about earlier, a resident of Ilima. That is where he is born and raised. We also have the Valera siblings. Alicia Valera and her brother are both also natives to Ilima. And the final character we're going to talk about is kind of someone that no one in the universe likes to talk about. We have a Niles Samson. Yes, the basically creator of the Locust himself. Originally his home place, his home birth, the place where he was born and raised was Ilima, along with Julia Samson, which I believe is his wife. So those are just some of the names I have here. I mean, we can throw out other names that people know, like Wizen. Wizen's in the story. We can talk about Wizen. Panturo, I think he's a collectible. We have the other Valera, G. Valera, which is like another collectible you find. I'll cover it really quick here. There's another character that has the last name Valera that also ended up dying and was originally from Ilima, just like the Valera siblings we know of. We don't know the relation they have with everyone. Could be an uncle, father, cousin, anything. We don't know. But basically, they also exist. They just never really get brought up. So there you go. That's Ilima, the fascinating world of Ilima and Ephyra. I don't know if I'm going to cover more cities on their own. I think I wouldn't mind doing it. I could pick a color for whatever faction currently holds it. I think purple was good for this one. I mean, it's been changed so many times. Like, you go from human to locust to human to whatever to nothing, then settlement. I think purple works fine for that choice. So I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. And thank the patrons for making this possible. We're going to be done with this portion. We're moving on to our final character before the final character. The last character that came last in the polls is Kim. So we're going to talk about Kim. We're going to go into Kim, talk. I think it'll be a fascinating conversation. I have some ideas for Mr. Kim. And then we'll get to the final character. We will cover him at the very end. I think y'all already know who it is. But yeah, that's going to do it. Love y'all to death. Later.